Hi, this is Mike from BandLab, and in this video, we're going to look at how you can use effects to improve your mix in BandLab. You can open this project yourself with the link in the video description, and if you find this guide useful, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be the first to know when new videos drop. Using BandLab's built-in effects processors is a great way to get the most out of your mix. Let's quickly make a track, then add some effects to improve how it sounds. I start by setting the project tempo to 90 beats per minute and the project key to F minor. I add a virtual instrument track and stick with the default grand piano instrument. I sequence a chord progression that plays F minor 7, D flat major 7, C minor 7, and D flat major 7. I turn this track down to -6 dB to give me more headroom in the mix to add other elements. I create another instrument track and set this to drum pads 808 kit. I program a beat with snares on the second and fourth beat, kicks on the first and fourth eighth notes, and closed hats on eighth notes. I duplicate this out for the rest of the 4-bar clip. To duplicate notes or clips in BandLab, hold Option on Mac or Alt on Windows and drag them over. I set this track to -6 dB too. Now it's time for a bass line. I set an instrument track to 808's rumble bass. I program a bass line that follows the root note of the chords, hitting an octave up on the fourth eighth note. I set this track to -6 dB also. The final element I'm going to add is the lead. For this, I select Lead's G-Funk sign. I program in a part that plays F, F, E flat, F, C, F, E flat. Note that I use overlapping notes. This is important for this part, because when the notes overlap, the pitch glides from one note to another, giving us that smooth West Coast style sound. This part is pretty loud and a little piercing, so I turn it down to -10 dB. Now we have our musical idea, and it sounds pretty good. The instruments used are clean sounding and work well together. However, it's not perfect. I feel that the mix is dominated by piano and lead sounds, and I want the beats and bass to be more at the forefront of the mix. As well as making the mix sound better, I think those changes will help a vocal fit into the mix better. Let's use some effects to make those changes. On the piano track, I bring up the effects panel. You can do this by clicking the effects button at the bottom of the screen, or with the plus effects button on the track. I want to mellow out the piano. I click the Add Effect button and select Reverb's Studio Reverb. Each effect has one or more parameters to control its sound. I don't want the reverb effect to sound as large, so I turn down the size parameter to 17%. You can hold Shift to get finer control over parameters. The reverb effect puts the sound in a virtual space, and this can be used to distance the sound from the listener, helping other sounds take center stage. I'd also like to smooth out the piano's top end. I add a tone EQ3M. This effect allows me to control the tone of the sound with broad low, mid, and high knobs. I turn the mid and high knobs down to -7 dB. This turns down the mids and highs of the sound, smoothing it out. Now I'm going to move on to the drums. First, I add a Dynamics BL1176. This compressor reduces the volume of the loudest parts of the track, and it also increases the volume of the signal, giving us a louder volume on average. To make the volume reduction of the louder part less severe, I set the ratio to 4:1. The kick drum on the 808 track has a lot of low-end energy, which I feel interferes with the separate 808 bass sound that I have on the next track. To make some room for the low end of the bass track, I add a tone multi-filter. I set this to high pass mode, which means that it cuts out the low frequencies. I set the cutoff frequency to 80 Hz, which means it's only going to affect the really low bass frequencies. Next, I want to give the bass more energy in the low mids, and to do this, I'm going to add a touch of distortion. This will help the bass be audible on smaller speakers that aren't as good at replicating low-end sounds. I add a distortion BL driver. I set the tone to 250 Hz, which means the sound won't be too bright, and turn the drive down to 0.4 to give it just a touch of distortion. Like the piano, I find the lead too upfront in the mix, and this time I'm going to use both delay and reverb to move it into the background. First, I add a delay filter echo, which gives us an echo effect. The delay knob controls the timing of each echo. I set this to 332 milliseconds. The feedback controls how long the signal keeps repeating for. I set this to 7%, so that the echoes don't last for too long. The mix controls the balance of the dry original signal and the wet echo signal. Again, I only want the echoes to be subtle, so I set this to 6%. Next, I add another studio reverb. Like the piano, I set the size to 17%. I then add another EQ3M. I set the mid to -5.7 dB and the high to -19 dB. This means that when the sound is playing higher, potentially more piercing notes, it's a bit quieter. Okay, let's listen to how the new version sounds compared to the old version. I feel the new version's beats and bass are fuller and punchier. The piano and lead are definitely less upfront sounding, which you might not like so much. However, let's try adding a vocal to compare how they work as backing tracks. To find a vocal, I open BandLab's Sounds and click the Loops tab, then set the instrument to Voice and the genre to hip-hop/trap. ATM hip-hop 120 A minor vocals 4-bar sounds like it might be a good fit.
You never knew.
I duplicate it out so it plays under both versions. And I set the track to -6 dB to balance it with the instruments.
You never knew.
feel the processed version's quieter piano and lead instruments leave more room in the mids and highs for the vocals, and there's less fighting over space in the mix. You can fork this project and make your own version of it using the link in the video description. Have fun!